All right, diving into Call of Duty, Black Ops 6, specifically the single-player campaign. We've got reviews from IGN and Xbox Era to break down.
Two great sources for in-depth gaming analysis.
Yeah, they really go deep. And right off the bat, both are calling this campaign a major comeback for the series.
Huge. Xbox Era called it a triumphant return.
That's a bold statement.
It is, and IGN said it's the best Cody campaign in years. Seems like a lot of that praise stems from the return to that spy thriller feel, very reminiscent of the original Black Ops.
Oh, okay, so like Mission Impossible Bourne Identity vibes? I'm into it.
Definitely leaning into that classic espionage feel. The reviews highlight missions set in really stylish locations, casinos, political galas.
Oh, I'm already picturing infiltrating a high-stakes poker game. Maybe using a tricked-out deck of cards as a weapon or something.
Well, maybe not that specifically, but yeah, you get the idea. They're playing with those classic spy movie tropes, delivering a very cinematic experience.
So we've got the setting, but what about the missions themselves? Anything particularly memorable that the reviewers highlighted?
IGN specifically called out the political gala and casino heist levels. They said those really showcase the strong mission design.
Sounds promising.
And they also teased a mission that seems completely different, comparing it to games like BioShock and Control.
Whoa, interesting. That's unexpected. I'm picturing some mind-bending psychological thriller stuff thrown in.
Could be. Sounds like they're really experimenting with variety this time around.
Yeah, because Xbox Era highlighted a desert mission. They said it felt like single-player Warzone. Not exactly sure what that means, but...
Right. Intriguing. Seems like they're offering everything from close-quarter stealth to these large-scale, open-ended objectives.
Well, actually, both reviewers mentioned another massive mission in the desert. This one focused on taking out SCU missile sites. Did they say how that plays out?
Yeah, that's the interesting part. It sounds like you have a lot of freedom in how you approach it.
I see.
Go in guns blazing, or take a more tactical, stealthy approach. It's up to you.
Oh, I love when games give you that kind of agency. Makes you feel like you're actually making strategic decisions.
Definitely. And it adds replayability, too. You might want to try different tactics on the second playthrough.
Okay, so variety, player choice.
Yeah.
What about new gameplay mechanics? Anything groundbreaking this year?
Well, they added a new movement system called Omni Movement, supposed to allow for much more fluid and dynamic movement.
Fluid and dynamic. Okay, but what does that actually look like in a first-person shooter? I'm having trouble picturing it.
Think sprinting in any direction, leaping sideways while firing, pulling off some serious action hero moves. The IGN reviewer even compared it to eating a fancy steak. Smooth, luxurious.
Okay, now I'm getting it.
Yeah.
But I can already see myself watching those moves ending up face down in the dirt.
Yeah, definitely a learning curve. The reviewer admitted most players will need practice, but when you nail those moves, it sounds incredibly satisfying.
So, Omni Movement aside, any other gameplay revamps?
They've also added the ability to upgrade your character with perks, the kind you usually find in multiplayer modes.
Oh, interesting. So they're incorporating some RPG elements into the single-player campaign.
Exactly. Things like extra health, faster reloads, that sort of thing.
I like that. What about Gunsmith? Did they mention that?
They did. The reviewer specifically said Gunsmith is rock solid in Black Ops 6, much more user-friendly and intuitive than in previous entries.
Good to hear. A clunky Gunsmith can really kill the fun.
Speaking of presentation, did the reviewers touch on the graphics, sound design, that kind of thing?
They were impressed. Xbox Era specifically praised the graphics, the globe-trotting locations, and the soundtrack. And IGN was blown away by the animation quality, especially during the cutscenes.
All right, so slick visuals, a great soundtrack, smooth animations. Sounds like they really stepped up their game in the presentation department.
They did. And it sounds like those high production values extend to the story and characters as well. Okay, let's talk story and characters then. What insights did the reviewers give us into the narrative and the folks we'll be meeting?
Well, Xbox Era was generally positive about the story, but felt the main villain was a bit underdeveloped.
Oh.
They also felt like there were some unanswered questions, hinting that those loose ends might be addressed in an expansion next year.
Classic sequel bait.
Maybe? But IGN actually praised the performances, especially Adler.
Adler's back.
He is. And the new characters, Marshall and Savati.
Nice. So what did they think about the writing overall?
They called it a fun balance between cliché and self-awareness.
So they're not taking themselves too seriously.
It seems like they struck a good balance, paying homage to those classic spy tropes, but injecting some humor and personality into the mix.
I like that. It's good to have a bit of fun with the genre. Now, I'm curious about the length of the campaign. Is it a short, action-packed thrill ride or a more substantial experience?
IGN said it's one of the longest Call of Duty campaigns to date, clocking in around 8 hours.
Hold on, 8 hours for a COD campaign? That's almost unheard of.
It is. Both reviewers mentioned branching paths and a home base upgrade system, things that add replay value. Sounds like there's plenty to keep players engaged.
Okay, good. I'd hate to see a long campaign that just feels like it's dragging on. Now, we know the game is set against the backdrop of the first Gulf War. Did the reviewers comment on how it handles that?
They did, and this is where we see some differing opinions.
Okay.
IGN criticized the campaign for using the Gulf War as a backdrop without really engaging with, the human cost of the conflict.
That's a good point. Given the potential impact a game like Call of Duty could have, it does feel like a bit of a missed opportunity.
Yeah, they argued that Black Ops 6 lacks the emotional nuance you find in many war and spy movies that it's trying to emulate.
I see their point. While I enjoy a good action-packed romp, I do appreciate it when games try to tackle complex themes in a meaningful way.
Right. It's a tough balance, but it sounds like IGN felt they could have done more.
Okay, so we've covered the setting, missions, gameplay, presentation, story, characters, and even the handling of the historical setting. I think we have a pretty good grasp on this single-player campaign. What's next?
Let's shift gears and dive into multiplayer. IGN had a lot to say about that. They even threw in another food analogy.
Another one. All right, you've got my attention. Let's hear it.
So IGN's reviewer, they had a blast with the multiplayer. More than they expected going in, actually.
More than they expected. This is someone who practically lived in Modern Warfare 3 for a year. What blew them away?
They said it was like being served a fancy steak when you're used to just, regular steak.
Okay, that's a delicious analogy, even if it is the second time we've heard it. But what exactly felt so fancy about this multiplayer?
They were impressed by, everything really. The maps, the movement, even the gunplay felt fresh.
We already talked about that Omni-movement system in the campaign, so I'm guessing that translates well to multiplayer.
Oh, absolutely. The reviewer even mentioned seeing clips of players pulling off these insane, Max Payne-style moves, diving and shooting in slow motion.
Whoa, okay, I need to see that. Though, as you said earlier, there's probably a learning curve with those moves.
Definitely. The reviewer admitted they were still getting the hang of it themselves.
Well, it wouldn't be Call of Duty without a few new tricks to learn.
Yeah.
Anything else stand out in the multiplayer review?
They were really happy with how they simplified weapon camo unlocks.
The grind for those camos. It never ends. What's different this year?
It's much more straightforward. You get a certain number of headshots with a weapon, and boom, you unlock the next camo.
So they're focusing on rewarding consistent skill, rather than, forcing players into specific playstyles for challenges.
Exactly. And the reviewer was really digging the designs of the higher level camos, called them sick as hell.
Nice. Now, last time we talked about Modern Warfare 2, that initial gunsmith system was a bit clunky. Any improvements there?
The reviewer specifically said gunsmithing in Black Ops 6 is rock solid, much more user-friendly.
That's always a win. A smooth gunsmith experience makes a world of difference.
Absolutely. Oh, and they were also happy with the game's optimization. They could crank up the graphics settings without any performance issues.
Good news for PC players out there.
Speaking of pushing limits, guess what's back?
Don't tell me. The tactical nuke.
You got it. 30 unanswered kills, though.
30. Ugh, that feels like a recipe for frustration, honestly.
Even the reviewer said no one managed to pull it off during the beta, so it's definitely a feat for only the most skilled players.
Or the luckiest. Did they talk about specific multiplayer modes at all?
They mentioned some of the classics: team deathmatch, domination, hardpoint, kill confirmed, gunfight, all the usual suspects.
Solid lineup. Any new modes?
There's one called Kill Order that caught my eye. They described it as team deathmatch with a twist.
Intriguing. What's the twist?
Each team has a randomly assigned high-value target marked on the map and radar for everyone to see.
Oh, so you've got to protect your VIP while also trying to take out the enemy team's VIP. Sounds chaotic.
It does. The HVT gets extra armor plates and can be revived, but the reviewer said that playing with randoms made it a bit frustrating.
Yeah, I can imagine. Not everyone's going to be on board with that whole team play aspect.
Right. They said no one seemed interested in actually protecting their HVT. Classic Call of Duty.
but I bet it's a blast with a coordinated team.
Oh, definitely. Communication and teamwork are key.
So overall, it seems like the multiplayer is shaping up to be another solid entry in the Call of Duty franchise.
I think so. Familiar but refined, with a few interesting additions. But you know what we haven't talked about yet?
Zombies mode. I'm dying to know what they've done with it this year, especially with all this buzz surrounding the campaign.
Well, the full IGN review for Zombies is still in progress, but
Well, what? Don't leave me hanging.
we do have those Steam user reviews, to give us some early insights.
True. Always take those with a grain of salt, of course. Of course. But it's good to get a pulse on the community's initial reactions.
What are they saying about Black Ops 6 overall?
Well, the game launched with a mixed reception on Steam.
Mixed, huh? Not exactly encouraging. What are the major complaints?
Seems like a mix of things. Some technical issues, performance problems, network hiccups, the game crashing at launch.
Ugh, launch day bugs.
Yeah.
The worst. Anything else?
Some players are unhappy with the Call of Duty HQ launcher, which, let's be honest, is rarely anyone's favorite thing.
I hear that. That launcher has a reputation.
Yeah, it's slow, takes forever to launch the game, that sort of thing. But there's another issue that's causing some frustration.
Okay, I'm listening.
It seems like Black Ops 6 counts towards the same playtime as Modern Warfare 2 and Modern Warfare 3 in the launcher.
So if you hit that 2-hour playtime limit before you realize you don't like the game, you're out of luck with Steam's refund policy.
Exactly. It's a clever way to, sidestep that policy,
Yeah.
but players aren't happy. I can understand why. No one likes feeling tricked. But technical issues and launcher complaints are par for the course these days. Anything else standing out?
Quite a few of the negative reviews are targeted at Zombies mode, which is surprising.
Zombies mode. Seriously. That's
Yeah.
usually the highlight of the Black Ops games.
I know. But many players are calling it uninspired, shallow.
That doesn't sound right. Any theories as to why?
Well, there's some speculation that Activision might have intentionally launched with a weaker Zombies mode,
Okay.
so they could sell classic maps as DLC later on, from Black Ops and Black Ops 2.
That's a cynical view, but I can't say it's entirely out of the realm of possibility. We'll have to see how it all plays out. But for now, it sounds like Zombies mode might be a bit of a disappointment.
It does, especially with the campaign getting so much praise.
It's interesting. We've only got those 2 professional reviews to go on, and even then, they haven't touched zombies or really gone in depth with multiplayer yet.
You're right. It is a bit odd for a game of this scale to launch with so few reviews.
Why do you think that is? Did Activision limit the number of review copies they sent out?
Possibly. Maybe they wanted to control the narrative, around the game's launch.
Meaning?
Well, maybe they were worried about any negative press overshadowing the positive buzz they were getting for the campaign, especially if the multiplayer zombies modes weren't quite ready.
That's fair. But it's also possible they just wanted to keep some things under wraps, to surprise players at launch.
Could be. It's all speculation at this point. But I'm curious to see what other reviewers say once the embargoes lift.
Definitely. Okay, so we've covered the campaign, gotten a taste of the multiplayer, and even peeked at the early reactions to Zombies mode. What are your final thoughts on Black Ops 6 Physics so far?
Based on what we've seen, it sounds like a mixed bag, but there's a lot of potential here. The campaign seems like a genuine return to form, and the multiplayer, while familiar, has enough new additions to keep things interesting.
I agree. That Omni movement system definitely sounds intriguing, even if it is a bit tricky to master.
Oh yeah, there's always a learning curve. But as for Zombies mode, well, we'll just have to wait and see if Activision addresses those concerns.
Fingers crossed. But even with those mixed early reviews, it sounds like Black Ops 6 has a lot to offer, especially for those fans who've been waiting for a return to that classic Black Ops feel.
I'd agree. And for those listeners who are still on the fence, check out those full reviews on IGN and Xbox Era. They'll paint a much more complete picture.
Great advice. And who knows, maybe by next week we'll have even more to talk about. Those multiplayer and zombies mode reviews should be dropping any day now.
Always more to explore in the world of Call of Duty.
On that note, I'll leave you with one final thought. IGN raised a fascinating point about the game using the Gulf War as a backdrop, but not really grappling with the human cost of the conflict. It made me wonder, what kind of impact could a game like Call of Duty have if it truly committed to exploring those complexities?
It's a good question. Could a game like Call of Duty be both entertaining and thought-provoking? Could it prompt players to think about history in a new light?
It's a tough balancing act, but it's a conversation worth having, especially as this franchise continues to evolve.
Food for thought, for sure.
Until next time, Happy gaming.
It's funny you mentioned the Gulf War setting because Xbox Era actually, they also had thoughts on the story's tone.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they described it as a bit silly towards the end.
A bit silly. That's kind of vague, isn't it?
Definitely. Could be playful, could be they felt it didn't take the setting seriously enough. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see what everyone thinks once more people have finished it.
Sounds like there's a lot to unpack there, but overall, based on what we know, would you say Black Ops 6 is a step in the right direction?
From what we've seen, I'd say absolutely. That campaign sounds like a real return to form.
Yeah.
You know, capturing that Black Ops spy thriller vibe, the one so many fans have missed.
Yeah, and the multiplayer seems solid too, even if it's not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, it sounds like they polished the core gameplay and added just enough new stuff like Omni movement to keep things fresh.
Though I have a feeling that's going to take some getting used to. I can already picture myself trying to pull off those moves and completely failing.
Well, there's always a learning curve with new mechanics. That's part of the fun, though, isn't it? Like learning a new dance move. Awkward at first, but once you get it, you're unstoppable.
I like that analogy. It's all about embracing the challenge, finding your groove.
Exactly. And as for zombies mode,
Yeah.
well, we'll have to see if Activision steps up and, delivers what we're all hoping for.
Fingers crossed. But even with those mixed early reviews, it sounds like Black Ops 6 has a lot to offer.
Yeah.
Especially for those fans who've been waiting for this kind of Black Ops experience.
I'd say so, yeah.
Yeah.
And hey, for those listeners who are still on the fence, I definitely second checking out the full reviews. IGN Xbox Era, they'll give you all those little details.
Always good to do your research. But as we wrap up this deep dive, that point about the Gulf War setting really stuck with me. It made me think about the impact games can have when they tackle these big real-world issues.
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, isn't it? Can a game like Call of Duty be known for its action and spectacle, but also, be a vehicle for something more?
Exactly. Could it offer a new perspective on history or challenge players to really think critically about these events?
It's definitely a balancing act, but I think it's a conversation worth having as games continue to evolve.
Couldn't agree more. And on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought. As you jump into Black Ops 6, or any game really, take a moment to consider the choices the developers made. How did they handle that historical context? Did they shy away from the tough questions, or did they really try to engage with those complexities?
It's always good to think critically about the media we consume, games included.
Well said. Until next time, happy gaming.